Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday. That's it. Goodbye, everybody. It's Wednesday, and we're going to call Alt Everything Wednesday, June 17th, 2020. Time for another show. We have a growing raft of stories waiting in the wings as Greg Dworkin prepares to join us. Your ordinary Wednesday pandemic nation in upheaval kind of a day, I guess. Anything extraordinary? Interesting news that I discovered on Twitter this morning. Have you heard of this Twitter website where you can just talk to all these other people? It's really interesting, and that way a lot of news comes to my attention. Bill brought this one to my attention this morning. I guess in our included in our wave of reassessing everything, essentially, in the wake of the latest round, I guess we have to call it, of the Black Lives Matter movement and associated wokeness. And I mean that in the reasonably good way, I guess. We're all reassessing all sorts of sources of subtle racism, and in some cases outright extremist, crazy racism. And, well, I guess probably depending on your perspective, you might place this somewhere differently along the spectrum of racism, I suppose. But here's what I learned. I should just get right to it. Bill told me, because he saw it somewhere else, I think USA Today, as a matter of fact, that Aunt Jemima products are going to have to undergo a redesign and renaming. It's been the logo that they've used has been redesigned over the years, I think, in the past to acknowledge the history of the product that we're really talking about. I don't remember whether this traces all the way back. We should take a look at it. I guess we'll find it on Twitter and take a look. But this, the Aunt Jemima figure traces back to, I guess, an actual black woman who I don't know whether this goes all the way back to, are we talking about somebody who was enslaved or somebody who was post-slavery employed as a domestic worker? I guess that's our term for it these days, cooking for a family. And basically the whole thing is that it all traces back to somebody who probably didn't really necessarily want to be spending their time cooking for some white family somewhere, but who did an excellent job of it, I suppose. And at any rate, based on some sort of real figure, and they updated her look many years ago to make it look less like she was a slave or indentured servant, or impoverished servant anyway, with the bandana on the head, and very evocative of Old South racist constructs. And then they updated it and now gave her a more modern look, like less like a slave and more like a professional, a cook of some. I guess there's no real reason to think that she looks particularly like a cook, except that she's associated with food products. But at any rate, apparently this not enough, and they may just go with a renaming of the product entirely. And this has brought out a new round of complaints, and one I wasn't aware of, that there was so much attachment to our pancake heritage that we can't possibly enjoy these breakfast treats under another name, had they been marketed as Pancako Fantastico or something for many years, although I suppose that could be considered insensitive to our Latine population. Just wanted to use that word once again. Although, really, I was speaking of the Latin-derived Pancako Fantastico. But You caught me out on that one. Anyway, there are people who complain that this is going to ruin their pancake experience, I guess. And I don't know how seriously we're supposed to take that. But yeah, here's the story from USA Today, or the tweet that connects to the story from USA Today. Aunt Jemima syrup and products. The syrup too. What? Will get a new name and image in a move toward progress on racial equality, reports say. I have no idea exactly how they're going to achieve this, but I feel certain that they can, I'm sure, improve on things. Let's see, is there a good explanation of the full background provided by USA Today, or is it just, that would be USA Yesterday. USA Today, we're just telling you the name is going to change. Dalvin Brown reporting for USA Today. Greg Dworkin reporting for duty. And once again, Skype not wanting to pop up. I'll find it. Here we go. Answering the phone. All right. Good morning, Greg. How are you? What are you having for breakfast?
Good morning. Let me just say hi to Abby.
Hi, Abby. Okay. Milkbones changing their name as well to Soy Milkbone. I don't know. Would you have to change? I don't think there's anything inherently racist about it, but you never know. We'll find out. Everything will be calmed down for Abby, and then we'll find out who was at the door.
Try this at home. I mean, we are thorough professionals.
Yes, absolutely. Also, woof. I thought I would just join in there to help cover up a little bit.
Hey, you know what else you shouldn't try at home? Don't take that's Mexazone. Mexazone at home.
Don't even try to say it. It's not a good idea. Yes, all right, well, I don't take it.
It's a very potent drug. And, you shouldn't have to even mention this. Why are you even saying something like that? Because people are taking bleach. That's why.
Oh, yes. Well, that's true.
People were taking hydroxychloroquine at home.
Have a pancake instead. Honestly, it couldn't be that much worse for you. Although I understand the new drug that you're talking about, it's not new, new treatment. It's effective against super bad, already well progressed COVID-19.
Yeah, if you have
in which case you're talking to a doctor.
It's an intravenous drug we use in the hospital for situations where there's horrible inflammation. Yeah. And that's why it's for people who are really, really, really sick.
If you need
but it has significant side effects, and so has to be watched and monitored carefully. At least they're known side effects, and it's also very cheap. And so if this press release turns out to be corroborated by the published study that hasn't happened yet, that's great news, but that doesn't mean you should be taking it at home.
It's a steroid, so don't try. And if it's intravenous, really honestly, I think you need professional help with that one.
Well, it comes in various and sundry forms, but just don't even go there.
Pancake form?
No. Yeah,
syrup
that
form?
pancake thing is obviously overdue. I was just reading that Hattie McDaniel, who, as you know, famously played the maid in Gone with the Wind and won an Oscar for it in 1940.
So it's all good.
With HBO Max pulling Gone with the Wind for retooling. Hattie McDaniel wasn't allowed to sit up front with her co-stars when she got her Oscar. She had to sit in the back.
That's wow.
That's a true thing. I checked it.
Okay, I believe it. Oh, look, here's the in the USA Today article is the original packaging of Aunt Jemima, and it makes it pretty clear what the problem was originally.
Yeah,
a Quaker Oats company, though, as it turns out.
This whole movement of Black Lives Matter is incredibly important, obviously, and having an effect on corporate America, not just policing America, not just political America.
Yeah.
And so hopefully it's one of those things that just reaches into every possible walk of life. One of the things that happens, and I remember this from the day that I was young, back in the 60s, is that when the kids push stuff and mean it, it gets into the culture.
Well,
and once it gets into the culture, it's kind of like unstoppable.
Kids.
So that's a good thing. You kids, not just, don't get off my lawn. In fact, teach us how we should be living our lives a little bit better.
Put your signs on my lawn.
No, put your signs on his lawn, but at least come talk to us.
I see. All right. Well, there's no voter fraud in lawn signs. They don't vote. We know that.
We know that. So these three profound things are happening. We have the pandemic, which is hardly done with. I mean, it's really exploding in the Southwest and in Florida and other southern states.
Yes.
And we have the Depression recession, which is also not done. An improvement over last month is not a good economy. And then, of course, we have the Black Lives Matter situation, which was sparked by injustice and handled poorly by the White House, and that continues. So all three of those are cross currents that are really hurting Trump's reelection prospects, and that's where I think we want to start today. Morning Consult has polled out Trump's job disapproval, and that's in a lot of ways the thing to watch, is at 57%. Navigator Research has one at 58%, and the worst job approval rating they've had so far for Trump. And Josh Kraushaar, a conservative columnist, tweets those and says there's not a lot of room for the president to grow and get back in the game. And in fact, one of the things about the Morning Consult poll is like there's 3% just about no undecideds. Nobody's undecided about Trump. He's the incumbent now. It is so different than 2016 when you had a bunch of people say, I don't know with this guy, but I don't like that, You know this guy.
Okay,
I don't know this guy. That doesn't exist anymore. Everybody knows this guy. So Microsoft tracker polling has Trump today approved 37, disapprove 59, 57, 58, 59 disapprove. I mean, those are just not good numbers for him. And of course, yesterday was just a slew, or as you like to say, a raft of polling, all of which was terrible for Trump.
Well,
today we have Ipsos approved 38, disapproved 37. Navigator is 41-58 for that poll, the worst Trump numbers they've had so far. Morning Consult 40-57. Change Research, I don't particularly like that poll. It's a C- poll on
I would like to,
38 is 43-57. So the disapprove over approved numbers in those four polls, 19, 17, 17, and 14. Ipsos has Biden 48, Trump 35 in the head-to-head. That's a 13-point lead.
Okay.
And then in individual states, Change Research has a bunch of polls. Again, it's hard to keep them too much because they're not a great pollster. But Change Research has the overall Biden 51, Trump 41.
Yes.
All right. Florida, a 7-point lead for Biden at 50-43. Notice how often he's hitting 50. Pennsylvania, Biden 49, Trump 46. That's a +3. Wisconsin, Biden 48, Trump 44, which is a +4. And as somebody pointed out on Twitter, a 50-46 or a 48-44 is much stronger than a 44-40. In other words, when you have undecideds, they could always break to the person who happens to be down, and that's how you catch up. But as you reach 50, that's not going to happen. In Michigan, just to give you an idea of how bad a poll it is, Biden is 47, Trump 45. That's +2. Yesterday, Epic had Biden up by 16.
I like that number.
And TIP, which was not doing it for Investors Business Daily IBD, but usually does. Pretty good pollster. TIP had 13 Biden over Trump in Michigan.
Yes.
And in this one, Arizona Change Research has Biden 45, Trump 44. And again, yesterday, just a whole slew of other polls that came out with similar kinds of findings. And the big one there, which surprised everyone, is not just that Trump was losing in Michigan, but that Biden was ahead in Florida by 10 points in the TIP poll. That's just unbelievable.
It's hard to believe. That's for sure.
That's what makes it unbelievable. It's just hard to believe.
Yes.
Right. Okay. But all of those polls came out. And in fact, they're arguably worse this week than last week. All right. So I had a little mini Twitter rant this morning. And I said, what if, just hear me out, there are no undecideds with Trump and his numbers just stay the way they are? Then what if coronavirus gets worse and the economy stays the same or gets worse? And they're not unreasonable suppositions. And Greg Sargent over at the Plum Line was writing about this the other day, that Trump's poll numbers are dreadful. But apparently you're only allowed to write but things tighten because they always do. Or Trump has a habit of defying the polls.
Oh, yes.
And this is all based on 2016 and a lack of understanding of how pandemics and depressions roll. I still have this theory that people who cover politics really don't understand medicine and public health.
That could be.
And so I don't want to deal with the pandemic. It's out of my range of things I know about, not in my wheelhouse. And so I'll just ignore it and write everything as if it doesn't exist.
Okay.
And that is how I will handle not really having a good feel for what happens next. And that doesn't work because it's such a huge, overwhelming event.
Yes.
Now, maybe the conventional wisdom is true. Kyle Kondik, who's very smart, from Crystal Ball, wrote the other day, the conventional wisdom is always that things tighten because it's your safe bet.
Usually, yeah. I mean, when there's a normal human election going on.
These are not normal times. And
yes.
maybe it is a safe bet, but not the correct bet. And why pretend when we don't know? So, in fact, coronavirus is not done, and it's about to worsen in the Southwest and in the southern states. Maybe not New York City levels, but if you live where it's spiking, it's bad enough. Your hospitals are about to be overwhelmed. You're not going to hit huge death rates the way we did in New York City for a variety of reasons, including density, including lessons learned, but still bad enough.
Yeah,
And an improvement from last month's economy is still a terrible economy. And there are a lot of experts who are, and I'm not an economic expert, but there's a lot of experts predicting it's going to be months to years before we recover. And we are not getting a vaccine before November, no matter what Trump and Pence say. And it's not gone away, no matter what Trump and Pence say. So I'm not predicting anything, but I don't know why we're assuming that things will tighten. If anything, it might widen.
I guess. I mean,
but nobody writes about that. So as a smart pundit I know says, why is that? Why is that?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
Look,
I mean, what if Michigan is America?
What
if it went from a 6 to an 8 to a 16-point lead?
Oh. Then it would defy everything we know. And once again, they'd be right, though. Trump has defied the polls, or at least the polling history. It's hard to believe that anything widens after 16 points because it's never done that, because two relatively, if not competent, I don't know what to say. Everyone used to campaign within certain bounds, and you ordinarily had somebody who was, could pass as an educated adult human on both sides.
I'm okay with, people saying that it typically goes this way because that's absolutely correct. Okay. It's just that, the imagination needs to be widened.
Yes, all right. Why not?
And let's just include among the range of things, Overton window kind of thing, All
right.
Let's include in the range of things, Trump gets a narrow win or Trump gets an epic loss. And then things in the middle.
Right. Oh, well, sure.
That would That's
satisfy all the both sidesers and everything.
Yeah. So just include it all. That's all
I guess so. Yeah. Well, if you're looking at a 16-point gap, and your theory demands including a 17-point swing the other way, then surely, to be fair, you're going to have to include a 17-point swing in the other direction, or some sort of swing. That if
Ann Seltzer in Iowa is saying that Trump is up by 1, that basically represents a 10-point national lead. And again, we've been over this, but for those who may have missed last week, once you get above 4 or 5 points in the national head-to-head,
yes,
the Electoral College isn't going to save you. You don't have to worry about, okay, you're up by 27 points nationally, but what about the individual battlegrounds? They're going to follow.
Yes.
You're not going to have a big lead and have the Electoral College come and save you. That's not how it works. And in fact, a lot of the states tend to go together. Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin tend to move the same way, that kind of thing.
All right. That's true, too. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, you do get to, I think we kind of inherently understand the idea of so these votes have to be coming from somewhere. They can't all be in
California. There's an Electoral College advantage that Trump has for the same reason that the Senate has a rural advantage, just the way it's set up. But it's not that big.
Yes.
That's the point.
Okay.
Yes, it's true. But just to say, okay, but what about the Electoral College? Fine. That's true when you have a 2.5, 3-point lead. Then you have to worry about that stuff. Then you get 2016. This is not 2016.
True. As it turns out, it hasn't been for some time.
As it turns out, it hasn't been 2016 all year.
Yeah.
And probably won't be 2016 for the rest of the year.
Nothing we can do about
that's
it.
pretty
Even
safe
if we change the
conventional
name
wisdom,
of the pancakes to 2016 brand, it won't work.
Yeah. Meanwhile, let's see what else we have. A CNBC poll, Biden plus 10, Economist YouGov, Biden plus 8, CNN, Biden plus 14. And right now, Biden's lead in the Real Clear Politics head-to-head is 8.4. It's the highest it's been.
Okay.
And Trump is just about at the lowest he's been, but he's staying there. He's stuck at 42. And that's the thing, a lot of different ways to read this, all right? Right now, the average for the Biden-Trump race, Biden 50.1, Trump 41.7. Okay. So Biden's hitting 50 in a lot of these polls. When Clinton was leading
what it takes.
by similar amounts, she was up at 44. As we said before, that's a completely different animal. That means there's a lot of undecideds.
Yes.
But
Or
the other
Greens.
part of it is that Biden's lead has been totally stable. And Trump can't get above 42.
All right. Well, that's less than 50.
Right? The only poll that he's above 42 is Emerson, and that hardly counts.
Okay. Yeah.
And even in that one, Emerson gives Biden a 6-point lead.
Oh. What? I guess. All right. Yeah, I see. All right. He can be
53-47
better approval,
because
but
according
still
to Emerson,
lose.
0 people
Yeah.
are undecided.
Well, that might be the more accurate of the polls.
Well, if that's the
As it
case,
turns
that 53-47 is what we in the business call a win, and I'm not even in the business.
Yeah.
I don't even know
So
what
how do you
business
know?
that is, but it's clearly something that Biden is doing relatively well with. And what I'm trying to say is the reason
let's
he's
get to
doing
that.
that are so built in: pandemic,
Oh.
Black Lives Matter, economy,
Pancakes.
and Trump and who he is, that it's just hard to imagine something's going to happen to change all of that in the next 4.5 months. And sure, something might. Anything can happen. But what are the odds? Well, pretty low, actually.
Good. We're running out of time for some
We are.
miracle. That's also true. And
Jogi says.
I guess
It gets late early in these
Yeah.
parts. We're almost there. We're going to start voting in
gonna have to be
in less than 100 days.
hell of a miracle. Even an October surprise. I mean, the things you have to
So
overcome.
let's just call it the way
Wow.
we see it.
Okay, I think that's fair. Any surprise tricks, what have you, that he's going to pull is now going to have to overcome a
Biden
global
can have
pandemic
health
and
issues. Trump can have
Yes.
health issues.
He
It
does.
can happen when you're that age.
Right. True.
We know that.
You could advertise about
So
it.
there's always the unexpected. So I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but it's a difference between trying to interpret what's going on right now fairly without feeling like, well, I really was going to say that Biden's ahead, but I can't say that for reasons, and so I won't. That's what I'm trying to get rid of.
Okay. Well,
That's not the same thing as
I'll
there's a
support you
guarantee
there.
and a prediction that Biden wins. It would if the election were held today, but it's not today. We know that a lot of stuff can
It
happen.
wouldn't be a prediction.
But
at
I'm
all.
just saying that,
be a diction.
check everything. Check all of your conventional wisdom and double check it and make sure that there's some reason for why it's conventional wisdom and see if it fits this year. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Fair enough. Don't know if I can, force that on anybody, but we can give it a try.
Well, if it's between that and masks, I'd rather they wear masks.
Okay.
I
Well,
saw Jim
I'll
Langford
keep that in
today on Morning Joe,
Yes.
senator.
Oh, yeah, that
and
guy. I
Senator
remember him.
Jim Langford. And he was being asked about the Tulsa rally.
Because he's from Oklahoma.
And he said, if you have a pre-existing condition, maybe you shouldn't go.
I hate
And
Trump.
if you do go,
That's one. Yeah.
you should wear a mask. And one of the interviewers said to him, well, why not an outdoor venue? Well, it gets pretty hot in Oklahoma this time of year, so, that's not easy. And I thought to myself, why is nobody asking him, why have it at all?
No, well, yeah.
If it's not good to have
that.
inside, because public health people are telling you it's not, and if it's not good to have outside because you're telling us that it's too hot, then why are you having this at all?
You
Nobody said
gotta
you had to
it
have this.
somewhere. I guess that's true. You don't have to. And there's every chance that something goes entirely wrong with it. I mean, the fact that they're discussing moving it to an outdoor venue, it's Wednesday, and the rally is Saturday. It takes a long time to do one of these things. Now there's something I've done. I have some very, very limited, but actual, honest to God, professional type experience. It takes a good long time to set up a much, much smaller rally than that. You don't have to build the stadium, obviously. That's already there. But
doing it on short notice is difficult.
Yeah, it is. And there has to be logistics worked out ahead of time. And even if everything is set and you know where you're having it and all the permitting and everything is done, minimum 4 days on the ground to set something like that up, and you're out of time. And to switch venues, like we'll just do it out in the parking lot of the place. Yeah, you know who's not allowing that?
Wi-Fi?
Secret
How
Service.
do you pay for stuff? Where are the vendors?
Yes.
What's going on here? What are the logistics?
Yeah, I mean, you could try and
dare I say
wing
it? That would be like acquiring millions of hydroxychloroquine pills and not having a plan to distribute them.
Yes, and they have done that. And they did go to their standby plan, which is what they usually do with leftover, with the Super Bowl T-shirts for the team that actually ends up losing. You know,
Army surplus? They were going to give it to Army surplus?
They were going to give it to Central America.
Oh, okay.
And I think Bolsonaro and the Brazilians ended up with 1 million or so of these pills.
A Brazilian of them.
Yeah, that's right. The correct term. And what they're doing with it, I have no idea. If they're eating them, then
they're converting them to masks.
They're
because you really need to do that in Brazil right now.
So, well, you know, it wouldn't be it's certainly not the worst outcome in the world to dump 1 million malaria pills in Central and South America. They might be put to use for their intended use. But I don't know. I'm not certain how they're working it. Anyway, sorry about that and dumping that on all of you. Don't go out and buy this new one just yet, though. Hang on until after.
After the break.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're back with Greg Dworkin. I was just telling Greg, and it's now, by the way, now that we're done, Abby is online already for the new steroid drug. I did say you could buy it afterwards, but you will need a doctor's prescription for that and supervision as well.
Abby's not getting a doctor's prescription.
No.
She's just not.
And I found out, I guess in my another quick scan of things, it looks like there was no actual, no historical Aunt Jemima upon which the figure was based. It was just a racial stereotype from the beginning. They may have known somebody named Jemima back then, but or even now for that matter. But the packaging leaves no doubt about how offensive you can make pancake packaging if you're working back in the day. And I there's the excuse of things being a product of their times, but the point is the rendering has changed a lot and for the better, but hasn't, I guess, fixed all problems. I didn't know that we couldn't solve all societal racism by just changing the logo on the pancake, but as it turns out, there's more work to do. But anyway, I just thought I'd straighten that out. There was no historical Jemima per se. It was just packaging people saying, I guess back in those days, here's what someone stereotypically might look like who makes good pancakes. And I don't know why you need any racial element to that at all. It's just who made pancakes and who did any of the cooking back then. Well, there's your answer. You should see these packages. Oh my gosh. So anyway, now they're going to update things. and it'll be for the better. But then I guess there'll be some questions about what else.
I'm
will
pretty
the
sure I don't
ownership
want
be
to see
doing?
those packages.
Okay. Yeah, you know what? I mean, I think you now get the idea.
Yeah. I was looking at the Real Clear Politics poll for the general election, Trump versus Clinton, and in the year prior to the election, Clinton generally varied between 44 and 49, only hit 50 once, and that was on March 24th.
What a great day that was.
So
Everyone remembers
for
why.
Biden to hit 50 now is already not like what Clinton was doing. What's today? Today's the 17th. On the 17th of June, Clinton was 44 and Trump was 38.
Yes. Okay. There's not a great deal. I don't remember a whole lot of time spent
Right now,
by
Biden is 50
candidates.
and Trump is 42, 41.7.
Yeah.
So no, they're just.
There's usually
You can always go
undecideds
back
and
and say
others.
2016, and you can say that right up until the election because nobody's going to be able to prove you wrong until right after the election. But that's just not how it's looking.
Okay. I'm ready to accept that.
Okay.
We have a new entrant in the Karen sweepstakes. Sorry to all actual Karens who are nice people. Breaking news: a cop is in her car complaining about how long it's taking to get an Egg McMuffin.
Oh dear.
And she thinks it might be because she's a cop. So what can you do? They're poisoning milkshakes and delaying Egg McMuffins. It's chaos out there.
Right. Anyway, so we have that. So we had a lot in the pundit roundup to talk about.
Yeah.
Besides just the polls, and it's just amazing to me how this stuff is just going on and on and on with no signs of stopping. We do have Gene Robinson writing, Trump might go down in history as the last president of the Confederacy. And again, you have Republicans breaking with the president on saying, gee, it's okay to go ahead and consider changing these military bases away from the names of traitors and incompetents to, good people who actually knew what they were doing.
Yeah, why not? I mean, I don't know. I don't know what they think is going to happen to the army. Oh, I'm so sad. The name of my fort changed.
Well, right now the military is not particularly happy with Trump, and that's a big deal. Social conservatives aren't particularly happy right now. Josh Grashower writes, Trump appointed Gorsuch, writing the lead opinion is likely to deflate social conservatives less than 5 months before the election. A whole lot of speculation on the right side of the aisle about the whole Federalist project and the whole idea of giving up everything that you stand for, morality or otherwise, in order to be able to get your judges, as Peter Wenner puts it. I can see why so many evangelicals made a Faustian bargain to ensure Trump defeated Hillary Clinton. After all, if Hillary Clinton were president, today's landmark Supreme Court would have been a 6-3 loss, while under Trump, it was a 6-3 loss. Was it really worth it? Now, he's a never-Trumper, but definitely an evangelical, sees it from that point of view. And that's the kind of feedback I see on the evangelical side about it kind of rocking that world. That doesn't necessarily mean that it changes their vote. None of them are ever going to vote for Joe Biden. That's not the point. The point is how hard do they work for Trump's reelection and whether or not they stay home.
Okay.
John Storr from the editorial board also had an interesting series of tweets about that. This is all from the Pundit Roundup. It's toward the bottom there. And John Storr is somebody who is a Connecticut friend of mine, but also comes from the evangelical world himself, which is one of the reasons why I find that so interesting in terms of his take on this. And what he says is when it comes to the president's support among white evangelical Christians, my first instinct is skepticism, always. These people are not subject to political factors normal people are subject to, such as a pandemic that has killed more than 118,000 people. There's precious little Donald Trump can do to alienate them because the point in supporting him isn't protecting religious freedom or outlawing abortion. The point is seeing people punished who deserve to be punished and enjoying it.
Yep.
Again, he's originally from that world. This is why recent discussion over the alleged loss of support among white evangelical Christians was pretty meaningless. True, Trump had sky-high approval in March, and true, the approval dropped around 10 points a month later. That didn't indicate a serious shift. His approval was sky-high across all demographics due to the rally around the flag effect. That wasn't a big bump, but it was something of a tiny little mini blip. That was gone by April, and Trump's approval went back to normal. The president still has white evangelical Christians in his back pocket. Still, it's worth asking, what would alienate them? There were probably a few who disapproved of the way he staged a Bible photo op in Lafayette Square in front of an epistle.
What's going on here? Oh, there we are. I think we lost our signal stream.
Can you hear me?
I hear you now, but we got a connection drop there. But there you are. Yes.
And as I said Monday, there's probably a few who disliked Trump's little wink to the Washington press corps saying it's a Bible. God forbid, not my Bible. The result being a heightened and painful awareness of his pandering displays of empty piety. However, white evangelical Christians disgusted by this behavior have probably been disgusted for some time. The photo op didn't drive them away. It was just one more reason for leaving. White evangelicals taking the teachings of Jesus to heart are not who we should be talking about when asking what Trump could possibly do to alienate white evangelical Christians. A vast majority of that cohort is willing to eat virtually any insult as long as Trump sees to it that the right people are punished and, more importantly, that they can do the punishing. Yes. That's why Monday's ruling by the Supreme Court, which expanded anti-discrimination workplace protections to LGBTQ people, is a bigger setback than white evangelical leaders are willing to let on. You have to understand something about ultra-Orthodox twice-born Christianity when it comes to sex and gender in public and private life. Yes. You're either a man or you're a woman, a male or a female, masculine or feminine, men married women, women married men, and there's no in-between, and there's no gray area, there's no plus and. You're not born LGBTQ because birth is the most natural thing of all. Being LGBTQ, however, is unnatural. It's a choice, a sinful lifestyle choice, and you didn't choose anything, of course, but that might not have stopped you from feeling you were born a crime. Wow. This is not just a matter of culture or tradition. It's a matter of the natural order, God's law. And things outside the natural order are a perversion of God's law, an abomination that cannot be left alone, because leaving it alone would mean complicity in the perpetuation of sin against God. So to be in that category is to be a crime which requires punishment. Only through punishment can the human soul be redeemed. Yet the Supreme Court now says such punishment is illegal. Again, I emphasize, he's from that world.
Yes.
The High Court has given white evangelical business owners a kind of Sophie's choice: disobey the state and obey God, or obey the state and disobey God. And there's no area gray. It's either or. So it's strange, to say the least, to see white evangelical Christian leaders like Ralph Reed searching for areas of gray. Not a big deal, Reed told the Washington Post. What matters most is religious freedom and abortion. They rise far higher in the hierarchy of concerns of faith-based voters. Ultimately, seeing a reckoning of Roe v. Wade looms so much larger in the psyche of the right that I don't know that this is a demotivator, he said. Well, projection is the coin of the white evangelical realm, so it's safe to say that Reed means the opposite.
Okay.
Senate Republican nullified Barack Obama's right to nominate a Supreme Court justice with the full backing of white evangelicals appalled by the court's extension of marriage rights to same-sex couples. They voted for Trump in order to get another Scalia. They thought they got one with Neil Gorsuch. Yet here's Associate Justice Neil Gorsuch writing the High Court's majority opinion, saying that white evangelical business owners can obey the law or obey God, but not both. If that's not a demotivator, as Reed calls it, nothing is. Now, Reed is a political animal, as many white evangelicals are. They're not Trump's biggest problem, though. His biggest problem is the truly Orthodox people identifying as Christian first, America second. The ruling is for them a major setback, and many may even feel betrayed by the denial of their right to punish those deserving punishment by having gone all in for Trump and gotten in return a slap in the face. They're not going to vote for Biden, let's be real, but they don't have to vote for the incumbent. They don't have to vote at all if they feel demotivated, and the president has his work cut out for him to win re-election. Trump cannot lose a single white evangelical vote. And that's really the bottom line there. He needs every single one of them, and so he cannot afford to have some of them stray. Now, the trouble with polling that we're looking here, like the Biden with a 8-something lead, is it's not telling us where are those votes coming from. we know Biden's going up slightly and Trump's dropping more than Biden is going up. So we know that people are leaving Trump. We don't know who they are. We don't know if they are white evangelicals. We don't know that kind of granularity on the people who are straying away from Trump. If we knew that, we'd have a better sense of whether they're going to come back. But the assumption that they're going to come back without data, I think, is a flawed one. Maybe they will. But they might just stay home. They're not going to vote for a third party. There isn't one this year to speak of. But we know the people who don't like either one tend to vote Biden.
Okay.
And we know that there's not that many undecided compared to other years.
Yes.
So, I don't know. It just, again, goes back to that conventional wisdom. Know. Why do we think that things are going to tighten? We don't know that.
Right. We like to say it because
we like to say it. It's easy to say.
Air, right?
Then I don't have to analyze.
That's true. And 9 times out of 10, you're right. So why not go to that as a set play if you don't know what to say? And
exactly. Here, another thing from Morning Consult, and this came out the other day. Polling shows critics of take-a-knee protests.
Critics.
So if you didn't like Colin Kaepernick taking a knee, if you didn't like it, they are softening.
Oh.
Opposition softens in wake of George Floyd's
I don't see
death.
how you could go any other way, but people are crazy. So all right, good.
Well, it's not that people find it more acceptable. They don't.
They're just shutting up
but
about it.
The people who say it's unacceptable have dropped significantly.
Okay.
From 51 to 39. Now they don't know or they have no opinion.
Yeah. Well,
that went from 13 to 23. That's where that amount went. Typical to what happens when you have two people running, a Republican and a Democrat. The Republican does something really stupid and then drops. You don't necessarily see support for the Democrats go up. Now you have the Republicans go for I'm sure to I don't know. And the I don't know, rises. Yep. Eventually, over time, if that continues, they may drift over to the Democrat. But the first step is to say, okay, don't even call me Republican anymore. I'm now an independent.
Yeah.
Well, I may vote the way I always did, but don't call me Republican.
Oh, well, we've seen that before, certainly. Yeah, I mean, for how long were we taught, independence, that's embarrassed Republicans.
Yeah. So going from unacceptable form of protest from September 2017, May 2018, June 2020 for all adults, 48, 51, 39. And for white adults, 55, 58, 45.
Okay, that's...
For Republicans, 80, 84, 69.
Who disagree.
Or disagree, who find it unacceptable. Military members, 66, 63, 55.
All right. I find it hard to believe that... it was certainly a very powerful argument made in the last couple of weeks. You said you didn't like it this way, or that this is unacceptable, and you should be doing it peacefully.
What about this?
We did it peacefully, and nothing happened.
Right. What would you rather, a knee or, these so-called riots that you're complaining about that were actually started by Boogaloo people? Yes.
Important thing to catch up on. I can handle that in the second hour if you like.
Yeah, no, that you got to handle it. But, the whole thing is just, it's interesting. Again, what you have are teammates of Colin Kaepernick, the conservative-leaning NFL players saying, I was wrong.
Yes.
Okay. The number of people who aren't just star quarterbacks who do that, but, the linemen, the other people who are coming in and say, you've opened my eyes about this.
Yes.
The Oregon State coach?
Who
wore an OAN T-shirt?
Yeah, I don't know which coach it was. I did hear about the T-shirt, and
then had to do a hostage video saying, I take it all back.
Yeah, although where do you even get such a shirt, quite honestly?
Well, that's the point, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. All right, well, that's rough going. Okay. I'm getting a note here, although it's, I don't know whether, I'm not certain what it means. It's unconnected.
This is Oklahoma State.
Okay.
Mike
okay.
Gundy.
Oregon seemed unlikely.
Mike Gundy went fishing on Lake Texoma, donning his OAN T-shirt.
Why?
And Oklahoma State student athlete Juba Hubbard say, I will not stand for this. This is completely insensitive to everything going on in society, and it's unacceptable. I'm telling you, the kids are driving everything.
Yeah.
I will not be doing anything with Oklahoma State until things change. So then he had to do that hostage
All
video.
right. Great. Yeah, use the leverage. I mean, they didn't always have it. I'm glad they have it now.
Yeah, I think he makes like, what, $15 million a year, and he's like the 15th or 16th ranked paid football coach or something.
Yeah. And how many times we have to hear that the football coaches always get more than the president of the university, certainly way more, 5 times, 10 times, 15 times what professors get. With the big money, you got to change your shirt. That's why you get the big bucks. Sorry. All right. Well, I don't even know where you would go or why you would get an OAN T-shirt. I can't even imagine thinking that's what I need. A T-shirt with my favorite television network on it.
Somebody was saying, I was going to watch the video, but I couldn't because it was like disco. It was too distracting.
Okay. You never know.
But again, all this stuff happens because I'm just trying to point out that the ubiquity of the cultural change is just so enormous that it's affecting everything. It's affecting corporate America. It's affecting the NCAA. It's affecting sports. And the idea that, that's just like all going to turn around in a week and a half because Biden made a gaffe.
Yes, unlikely.
Unlikely.
Right. Got it. All right.
Anyway, that's my summary and rant for today.
Very nice. Well done. And I think we also solved our pancake problem along the way. Okay. Very good. All right. Let's see. Tomorrow makes it Thursday.
Let me just make a suggestion. I've made the suggestion before. I've done it for years, this suggestion, because I like to practice what I preach. If you're going to have pancakes, use 100% Vermont or New Hampshire or Maine maple syrup.
Canadian?
Grade A fancy. Canadian if you can't get anything else.
All right. Wow. Slap in the face of Canada. And what's weird is they say sorry once you slap them. So
yeah,
that's awful.
They say sorry, I must have done something.
Yeah, I guess so.
They're different than us.
Yeah. Wow. All right.
I mean, they say sorry and they mean it, but have the real stuff.
What I'm finding is weird. The people who are tweeting about the Aunt Jemima stuff, as though they had no idea that they made pancake mix. They're familiar only with the syrup, which is really odd. And I thought, I just find that interesting. I don't know how you missed it, but
if you make your pancakes from scratch, you wouldn't know about the mix.
I guess that's it. But then, if you make your pancakes from scratch and use
it's not a hard
syrup,
recipe.
I don't know what's going on. Yeah, that's true. I mean, you don't need any special, expertise per se. But how you could make scratch pancake mix and then say, I'll have corn syrup with caramel color, please. I don't know. But people are weird. They have their preferences.
That they do.
As a matter of fact, even in this house, I have difficulty. I'm the only fan of real maple syrup. Others have been raised on the fake stuff, and they like it.
Failed as a parent. What can I say? How are they with lobster?
The Aunt Jemima lobster is fine with them.
It's one of the great New England, things.
Yeah.
Lobster, along with 100% maple syrup. The problem is they go together poorly.
Oh yes, right, true.
Which is probably why New England doesn't dominate the world.
Right. Well, among other reasons, I guess. How are they?
No, that's the
they like crab better than lobster. Is the real answer. But okay, all right. Thank you.
Alrighty, take care,
yes,
and I'll find something to talk about tomorrow.
Good, because we appear to be out here.
Stay well and wear a mask.
Okay, thanks. You do the same. We'll talk again tomorrow. Good question from one of our resident Canadians. Brian Monroe asks whether the board game Sorry was in fact invented in Canada. That could be. Suri is the real pronunciation. Oh, and more comments here. Who are we looking at here? Adkaratic. Is that right? This is another one of the names that you wonder, am I reading this correctly? Anyway, has this to say, tell Greg, too late, but he'll get the message. He may even be listening now. Greg, New York State is the second largest producer of maple syrup in the country. Try New York maple syrup. Why don't you try New York maple syrup? Maple syrup, as it turns out, It's produced even further south than I knew, and I guess anywhere you can grow maple trees. Although I had the idea in my head that northern climes were perhaps more suited to producing these sugar maples. But I find maple syrup locally made in a lot of places, and including here in Virginia. There's a locally made somehow maple syrup. I guess it's just not a big deal, but it's out there. And in my travels throughout mid-Atlantic and Northeast, I've been surprised by that. But not enough maple syrup consumption in my house to bolster my collection much further than that. All right, let's see. Oh, look at this. Some additional entries in the Aunt Jemima story here. We have this from Unnamed Dem. That's the ironically enough, the name under which this person operates on Twitter. Unnamed Dem says, in response to my having tweeted some poor rando who was concerned with his pancake heritage being lost here, that yes, there's also the story of the Antifa terrorists who made Colgate remove this tribute to black dental care. I should point out here that the person I was retweeting, who was replying to the USA Today tweet about the Aunt Jemima story, said, "Corporate America is bowing to Black Lives Matter," which is okay. "There's no reason to do this." This is horrible, but that being the current iteration of the Aunt Jemima logo figure, that honors a black woman's cooking. Wow, what an excuse. I mean, I guess that's right out of the Washington football breadsticks playbook, no pun intended, for defending the name. They like to say, well, he's a very noble-looking Native American fellow. The team name honors the noble tradition somehow of being Native American by drawing a picture of them and calling them a racist name somehow. I don't know. I guess those are just the contortions that people go through. And here the idea that, well, this honors a black woman's cooking, which I guess is what maybe made me think, well, maybe there really was an actual Jemima, whatever, who was cooking under whatever conditions for somebody way back when, in the days when you would name your pancake mix products after a person like that and feel good about it, that this was all based on. But I guess it's not. It was, like I said, a stereotype from the beginning. It turns out, let's see, other people have tweeted to me more screenshots and of where this stuff came from. Look at this. So let's see. Greg sends us an entry. Is this from like Wikipedia or something? It takes a look. It looks like it. Anna Short Harrington, born in 1897 in Marlborough County, South Carolina, where she was no doubt super free to do whatever she wanted with her life, began her career as Aunt Jemima in 1935. Oh, this is interesting. Yes, I was reading earlier that back in the late 1800s at some public exhibition or another, they, I think I did see it come by on Twitter. Maybe I should go and look for it. But that they needed to hire somebody to be, to play Aunt Jemima at this event. And the idea was that you could come and meet the real Aunt Jemima, who was just hired to portray Aunt Jemima, and taste her delicious pancakes at their booth at this show, an exhibition of some kind. And I thought I had opened that so that I could share that with everybody. There it is. Okay. And thanks to whoever tweeted it forward into my tweet stream. This, I guess I'll retweet this thing, or at least capture it for sharing in the summary later on. This debuted in the 1893 Chicago World Fair. And there's the advertisement beneath that shows it. The the original company, I guess, hired Nancy Green to be Aunt Jemima and demo the product. The heavily leaning in mammy stereotypes made the product a big hit at the fair. 1893, I guess you could get away with that. They even renamed it after her, making Green a living trademark until her death. So, maybe it wasn't originally called Aunt Jemima after all, but then they decided to use her as a sort of mascot and then turned her into the brand name as well. And what Greg sent me is maybe her successor, right? What do we say here? She was, in 1893, so she may have portrayed the caricature, really, until 1935 when this other person took over, Anna Short Harrington, born in 1897 when they were already working with someone else. And let's see, she had to support 5 children, and she moved with her family to Syracuse, New York, where she cooked for a living. Quaker Oats discovered her when she was cooking at a fair. Okay, so a lot of this stuff revolves around fairs for some reason. An ad in Woman's Home Companion. Real up-to-date stuff there. Woman's Home Companion in November 1935. And just what an interesting title for a magazine, too. Like, wouldn't, your husband or family be your home companion? Well, no, because they didn't spend any time with you. You were isolated. Women were self-isolating at home forever, even before coronavirus. And Women's Home Companion, November 1935, said, "Let ol' auntie sing in yo kitchen." Oh, my goodness. It was her picture with a bandana used on Quaker Oats products. That is to say, Anna Short Harrington, her picture. Harrington continued to play the role for 14 years, and she made enough money, that's good, to buy a large house and rent rooms. And then that house was demolished to make way for Interstate 81, just in case you thought that had an happy ending. We'll be right back. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show. You're on Networks Radio. Let's see, there's even more information here, but, okay. She made lots of money, or enough money, to buy a house and rent some rooms, and then that fantastic house was demolished to make way for Interstate 81. So, golly. Harrington died in 1955. This is interesting. According to John Troy Mcqueen, author of The Story of Aunt Jemima, this is... Okay, I've read ahead. It's just a short sentence. I can't believe what I'm reading aloud here. I mean, it's Wikipedia. It's not like I'm going to get any kind of genius insight here. But I thought I could get some good facts and all. But every once in a while, you're just reminded of, I don't know what to say. What does it remind me of? I'll tell you what's going on. Here's a person touted as an author. Now, granted, they're the author of The Story of Aunt Jemima. So I don't know, is this a great journalist? Is this an undiscovered talent? Was the author of many other fine works of art? Among those being The Story of Aunt Jemima. Maybe there's an entry for him in Wikipedia. We can find out what else he wrote. But I feel like he didn't really put his heart and soul into The Story of Aunt Jemima here. According to John Troy Mcqueen, author of The Story of Aunt Jemima, quote, this is an excerpt from the book now, "She was really famous for cooking pancakes," unquote. I feel like I just talked to Trump about Aunt Jemima. You're hearing that in the background. What a dumb statement. And it wasn't true, but I mean, like, wow, I wrote wow. Oh, for some reason, I absolutely have to know everything there is to know about Aunt Jemima immediately. Turning to the experts. Joining us now, John Troy Mcqueen, the author of The Story of Aunt Jemima. John, tell us about Aunt Jemima's, the real Aunt Jemima's life. Well, David, thank you for having me on, first of all. Black Lives Matter. Yeah, okay, thank you. Right. She was really famous for cooking pancakes. You're kidding. She was? She wasn't, but it's a pancake product. I mean, I figured that was going to be the attempt at the backstory, but I mean, that's one of those things that goes without saying, even though it wasn't true. It goes without saying. What's the rest of the book? I wonder. Anyway, the company first registered the Aunt Jemima trademark, in case you were wondering, in 1937. The company, by the way, was really famous for registering trademarks. So I just wanted to add that. Let's see. So maybe this is supposed to mean that there was partially, maybe sort of kind of a real person behind Aunt Jemima. And the answer is still no. There were real life figures from whom they drew later renditions of Aunt Jemima, because, and it wasn't like they drew it, I don't know. I mean, I guess the early ones were just caricatures. They said, how can I make somebody look like a stereotypical black woman cook who you might believe made absolutely fantastic pancakes for some reason. And after that, then they just said, well, let's get a woman who looks like that to be our Aunt Jemima. And then if she gets famous, we'll change our logo a little bit to look like her, even though she was only hired because she kind of looked like the stereotype. So I don't know. There's not a great deal to it other than what do we think will work to sell pancakes. By the way, Unnamed Dem had sent me this picture of to illustrate Antifa terrorists made Colgate remove this tribute, as he was referring to the idea that somehow Aunt Jemima was a tribute to black women. This tribute to black dental care, I guess long since abandoned, I hope, Darky toothpaste, which looks like the sort of thing that maybe went out of production in the 1920s or 30s, and looks like a minstrel show type illustration here. I think you know the story. Wow. So I don't know. Now we should look up the history of Darky toothpaste. How long did it take them to get rid of Darky toothpaste? Is there anything about that in Wikipedia? I'm sort of curious, and it's as good a show as as any at this point. Oh, interesting. Did you mean Darlie toothpaste? These efforts to save these blatantly racist things are unbelievable. I guess, I mean, if you were holding out hope of a new era of progress and equality because they were going to change the name of the pancake mix, then fine. But, like, I think they really have to kind of start afresh. And who knows what they'll come up with. But anyway, there was, in fact, a Darky toothpaste. It turns out, in my quick reading of the entry here in Wikipedia, is that it was for the Asian market, but it was, let's see, produced by Hawley and Hazel Chemical Company, established in Shanghai in 1933 and later based in Hong Kong and Taiwan, where I guess they weren't immediately interested in calling out the racism inherent in it because they had problems of their own. But yes, it was in fact called Darky toothpaste, but the entry says it was formerly known as Darky. They apparently at some point came to realize, oh my gosh, this is racist, and changed the name. Not Darky, Darlie, Darlie. They moved one key to the right on a keyboard. I don't know whether they were working with keyboards, typewriters, obviously, at the time, but holy mackerel. I don't know what to tell you. So let me see. What's the Wikipedia say about this? This has now become endlessly fascinating. They also got rid of the minstrel blackface person. It wouldn't have made any sense anymore with Darky. Why, though, name it Darky at all? I'm curious if there's any logic to it, or they were just like, I'm a racist and I make toothpaste. I came to, chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm a racist and I make. I see. Okay, the bright teeth in contrast to the black face. Boy, well, it's pretty shameful. How long did this last? Darlie, formerly known as Darky, is a toothpaste brand of Hawley and Hazel Chemical Company. Official slogan, powering your smile. That's, I guess, where it began to dawn on me what they were doing here. Established in Shanghai in 1933, later based in Hong Kong in 1973, and then Taiwan. I guess, well, they got the order backwards for some reason. 1933, Shanghai, moved to Taiwan, 1949, because Chinese Revolution. And then to Hong Kong, because I guess they thought that was a safe move somehow, and then it turned out not to be. Hawley and Hazel was acquired, though, in 1985 by the United States-based Colgate-Palmolive, although the product, Darlie, not Darky, is not marketed by Colgate-Palmolive. And I don't know whether that means it's not sold at all anymore or they just let somebody else market it. I don't know. Darky, they helpfully explain, is it's Wikipedia, right? They have to explain it. Primarily in primarily the United Kingdom, United States, and Canada, used as a derogatory term referring to black people. The packaging featured an image of a wide-eyed white man in blackface wearing a top hat, monocle, and bow tie, an image associated with minstrel shows. Quite the case, yes. Let's see. Oh, this is interesting, too. Let's see. In 1985, after Colgate-Palmolive acquired the company lasted until 85. Significant controversy erupted over the brand in the U.S., to which Colgate CEO Reuben Mark responded by issuing an apology, replacing the English name of the toothpaste to Darlie in 1989. Oh, boy. And altering the image of the packaging to show a racially ambiguous face in a top hat to avoid racial misunderstanding. How about stop with the toothpaste altogether? However, the Chinese name of the brand, and I can't pronounce it, it's in Chinese characters, translates in English, and I guess it's still the brand name of the toothpaste. It translates to Black Person Toothpaste and remains the same. And a Chinese language advertising campaign reassured customers that Black Person Toothpaste is still Black Person Toothpaste. So, okay. I mean, it's easy enough to boycott Darlie, but what do you do now? You boycott Colgate-Palmolive? I don't know. I guess so. I can't make out what the relationship is here, but that seems unreformed. Holy cow. Let me continue on. It's not that much longer. After the Colgate acquisition, the toothpaste continued to be sold in some Asian countries, including Taiwan, China, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, and Thailand, where its brand and logo are not considered offensive, but they are. That's bad news. Colgate announced that the product would not be sold outside of Asia, so we'll just contain it there. We'll be racist there, where it's okay. It's not. The brand experienced an increase in both popularity and notoriety in 2004. After the toothpaste, along with other allegedly racist brands, was featured in the mockumentary, and not even much of a mock anymore, CSA, Confederate States of America. It was depicted as a fictional brand that is popular in the alternative history of the film. The final credits reveal that it, along with most of the other brands, are in fact genuine products. The original flavor of Darlie was mint. Other flavors are available for children. Fantastic. As of 1989, the toothpaste held a 75% market share in Taiwan. Show's over, everybody. 50% in Singapore, 30% in Malaysia, Hong Kong, and 20% in Thailand. Nowadays, it is one of the best-selling toothpaste brands in China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Singapore, and Thailand, with between 10 and 30% market share. Wow. All right. It exists. It's out there, and they got work to do in Asia, but we got our own work to do here first. I'm sure they'll come, hopefully, to better conclusions about these racist stereotypes in Asia on their own, or perhaps under pressure from us, but in due time. Oh, wow. Well, that was really sort of amazing. I wasn't expecting to go down that road. And I don't know. Now, am I going to fall into this rabbit hole now? Brian sends us an interesting story about maple syrup. Is it? It's Wikipedia. It's not the story of maple syrup itself, is it? Because, no. The Great Canadian Maple Syrup Heist. I did not think we were going here. That's a real thing. Apparently, the informal name of a months-long theft between 2011 and 2012. That felt like it must be an old-timey thing, but it's not. Of nearly 3,000 tons of maple syrup. I have never thought of maple syrup as the kind of thing that would be measured in tons, but I guess when you're talking about that much of it. This was valued, by the way, in Canadian money. So, take that for what it's worth, which is about, I guess, what? Now, you can actually figure out what that is. So it's not even a figure of speech. 18.7 million Canadian dollars at the time, taken from a storage facility in Quebec. How? Don't know. The facility was operated by the Federation of Quebec Maple Syrup Producers. That makes sense. The name is given here in French because that's what you have to do in Canada. But I'm in the United States. I don't have to read it, and I wouldn't. The Francophones would just be upset with me anyway. Well, they represent 77% of the global maple syrup supply. The Federation does, and have been compared to a cartel. Wow, so a little bit like, cocaine and maple syrup. Adjusted for inflation in 2018, this heist is considered the most valuable in Canadian history, which is really more of a tribute to, the niceness and politeness of Canadians more than anything else. With the exception of this heist, I guess they're just not stealing a great deal of things from one another. But, okay, the biggest theft in Canadian history was that time they stole almost 19 million Canadian dollars worth of syrup. Wow. How long is this entry, really, honestly? The fact that it exists is enough, really. And we'll just read the section about the theft itself. Over the course of several months between 2011 and 2012, and that's how long it would take to move that much syrup, I guess, the contents of 9,571 barrels, now we know how it moved, valued at $18.7 million, was stolen in a suspected insider job, and you'd have to say, it almost has to be one, right? From a FPAQ facility in, St. Louis de Blandford is our best anglicized reading of the town in Quebec, where the barrels originated and were stolen from. The syrup was stored in unmarked white metal barrels, inspected only once a year. Thieves used trucks. Who's going to inspect them, right? I mean, but that's interesting. That's what makes it such a fascinating insider job. You're right, Brian. There's something interesting about this. They'll never catch us. I happen to know because I'm an insider. They only inspect the barrels once a year. And so after that day, we'll steal the barrels. And then what? So check it out. It's a whole plot. Won't they notice the barrels are missing when they go to sell them? Thieves used trucks to transport barrels to a remote sugar shack where they siphoned off the maple syrup, refilled the barrels with water, and then returned them to the facility so as not to be caught, right? They'll look in here. They'll only inspect the barrels once a year. But, inspections like the way Trump does with the bunker, right? You might do several short inspections, just very brief, so that people don't think you're afraid or hiding from anything. We'll fill them with water. Although it seems to me like people who are in the syrup game, as we call it in the biz, for a living, could probably tell the difference very quickly if they move the barrels at all. And the weight, the density, the viscosity of the liquid inside. This is clearly water, not syrup. But why move the barrels? And what kind of inspection is necessary of the barrel? There they are. We're done for the day. This is a good job, really. And you should get, you could see why people move into this industry. And the greed, unbelievable, though. I mean, to be paid to inspect maple syrup barrels once a year and still say, I need more, is confounding. The stolen syrup was, they filled the barrels with water, returned the barrels to the facility. As the operation progressed, the thieves started siphoning syrup directly off the barrels in reserve without refilling them. And you see that the greed is really getting the better of them here. We need to siphon this stuff off. It's very troublesome to move the barrels back and forth. Nobody moves the barrels anyway. Why are we bothering to refill them? You imagine that there's an MBA somewhere in the operation saying, the water costs alone are killing us. We just got to stop refilling this thing with any kind of a liquid. Just put the barrels back and leave it at that. The stolen syrup, this is interesting. If you take it, siphon it from the barrels on site, what are you putting the syrup into? The stolen syrup was trucked to the south in Vermont and to the east, staying in Canada, in New Brunswick, where it was trafficked in many small batches to reduce suspicion. It was typically sold to legitimate syrup distributors. Hey, I'm a legitimate syrup distributor. Who were unaware of its origin. Wow. So it was discovered in 2012 when the FBAQ took their annual inventory, we do it once a year, of syrup barrels. How many syrup barrels do we have? I don't know. Terrible, like French-Canadian stereotypical accent for which you can now be furious with me. The inspector started climbing up the barrels and nearly fell, expecting 600-pound barrels, but finding them to be empty. That's how they inspect them. I'll climb them. Police later recovered hundreds of barrels of the syrup from an exporter based in Kedgwick, New Brunswick, between 18th and 20th of December of 2012. Police arrested 17 men related to the theft and no women. So how do you like that? The ladies know how to control themselves when it comes to stealing syrup, I guess. There was if you haven't had enough, holy mackerel. The theft was featured in a Netflix documentary series, Dirty Money. Season 1, Episode 5, The Maple Syrup Heist. Obviously a long-running series about many things, many theft ideas. But there's a lot here. Let's see. Canadian folk band Trent Severn wrote a song, Stealin' Syrup, based on the heist. It's a creative title. Stealin' Syrup. You guys in the band, do you know the guy who wrote the story of Aunt Jemima? You guys have a similar style. I think you should get together. The theft is also alluded to in the television show Elementary, Season 5, Episode 13, entitled Over a Barrel. Wow. In that episode, barrels are shown being brought by barge to a warehouse in New York, causing the disappearance of a particular gang. Really? However, the gang is merely hiding in plain sight, selling smuggled maple syrup rather than smuggled cocaine. There's the cocaine maple syrup connection. There's a lot of popular cultural references to this heist, as you might imagine, because Brian's right, it is fascinating, although not necessarily endlessly fascinating, because, well, we've got a break coming up, and how much more can you go on about this? And here's the mighty OCD, who has sent us a link to one of the to the Dirty Money Netflix episode. So I don't know. I'll include that, I guess, along with the great Canadian maple syrup heist in the roundup, because how can I avoid it now? We've spent too long on it. I know there's other stories out there. I'm going to tell you some of them. One small bit of news I'll add to the mix, the pancake mix here, if you will. The First Lady of Ukraine. You know, the title that goes along with the I guess the Prime Minister's wife. Yeah, okay. You know, that famous Prime Minister of Ukraine who got caught up in Trump's antics. Well, his wife, Olena Zelenska, has been hospitalized with COVID-19, according to the Kiev Post, as you and I would now call it. We're reminded. That's, I don't know. Do you really need the news about it? I mean, that's who she is. That's what she's got. Zelenska's diagnosis is currently bilateral polysegmental pneumonia of moderate severity. Ask Greg exactly what that means, but maybe she's got a good chance then of recovering. Although, interesting, it's the president's office that made the announcement. I had said prime minister, but Zelensky is the president, I suppose. And and they're interesting naming traditions. She's not, we wouldn't call her Zelensky the way we call him Zelensky. She's Zelenska. They have their own Russian, Ukrainian language naming protocols. Okay. I'm glad I got that one in there. Here's another interesting story of international intrigue, possibly, although they don't play it this way. New York Times reported yesterday, we've mentioned the disasters, the slow motion, not even that slow, in the meat plants in this country with COVID-19 spreading like wildfire. But you'll recall that these plants can't close. The president of the United States, not of Ukraine, but ostensibly the president of the United States is the one who invoked the Defense Production Act to force the meat plants to stay open so that there would be no meat shortages here in the United States, which is what made the news uncovered in this report somewhat startling. As meat plants stayed open to feed Americans, exports to China surged, which ordinarily I guess wouldn't be that big of a problem and wouldn't be a very big surprise either, since some of the larger meat, particularly pork producers in this country, Smithfield among them, are Chinese owned now. And apparently the Chinese market for imported pork is fairly robust, and so it made some sense for them to come and acquire the company. But to use the Defense Production Act to force these plants to stay open and these workers to risk, and it's more than a risk, it's basically a sentence to COVID-19. You're going to get it if you're working in these plants, is the way it seems to be. It was, I don't know, maybe it was somehow acceptable to Americans that that's the price of making sure we don't have meat shortages, which I think is pretty universally recognized as like Banana Republic, third world kind of thing to have happen. It doesn't happen in America. We don't have meat shortages. We can't have that. So Defense Production Act is invoked to keep the plants open. And yet, it made it sound like we were imminently, on the brink of shortages of meat. And you would think then that all the meat being produced would be being rushed to American markets to keep American consumers supplied. But in fact, a great deal of it was going to China. So, congratulations, I guess, are in order. Donald Trump, first American president to invoke the Defense Production Act in service to the Communist Party of China. Excellent. Well done there, sir. I think a first for you. You always enjoy being the first in history to do something. And there you go. You've made it. While lobbying to keep operating during the pandemic, the U.S. industry, they were actually lobbying for it, sent a record amount of pork to a country vital to its growth, is the subheader here. Michael Corkery and David Yaffe Bellany on the byline. Smithfield Foods was the first company to warn in April that the coronavirus pandemic was pushing the United States perilously close to the edge in terms of our meat supply. Tyson Foods also sounded the alarm, saying that millions of pounds of meat will disappear from the nation's supply chain as plants were being forced to close because of outbreaks. That same month, Smithfield sent China 9,170 tons of pork, one of its highest monthly export totals to that market in the past 3 years. Tyson exported 1,289 tons of pork to China, the most since January 2017. So that's pretty interesting all by itself, right? We're going to have shortages. We're not going to be able to feed Americans. At the same time, sending huge quantities of pork to China instead. And this isn't maple syrup we're talking about, although a lot of it ends up as bacon. And so once again, I think, you know what? That's not the break music I want. It's the same music, but I want the 2-minute version of it. That'll screw things up a little bit. This whole show has been a little bit screwed up. It's been all about breakfast, really, quite honestly. Pancakes, syrup, now bacon. But very interesting that this would be happening in the middle of a pending shortage, don't you think? And were we short on pork products? Were we not short on pork products in the United States? Were they under contract and obligated? More when we come back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. We'll continue with this a little bit. Just sort of an interesting story. We'll continue with the bacon aspect of this. I think the heart of the story is that the meat packing industry was lobbying hard to be considered vital enough to the national security of America, to be an essential business, and so that they could stay open and produce. And I have a feeling that they would have been. They already were an essential industry as it was. I think producing food had pretty much exempted them from stay-at-home orders. Not that many of these plants were in states that issued their own stay-at-home orders anyway, so they probably wouldn't have affected them. But they were lobbying hard for remaining open and being allowed to remain open despite the fact that they were infecting hundreds and thousands of workers and creating outbreaks and hotspots in these states that had previously been insulated mostly from the worst effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. But I guess they leveraged the idea that, well, if there's a shortage of meat, all hell will break loose. And for the good of America, we have to stay open. We should be allowed to stay open. We should be protected from liability, from suits by our workers, et cetera, in order to feed America, when in fact they were instead feeding China, which, by the way, had pretty much controlled its COVID-19 outbreak just by comparison. Let's say that would be sort of an interesting thing to note. All in all, a record amount of the pork produced in the United States, 129,000 tons, was exported to China in April. Just as they were telling us here, we're going to have a meat shortage, 129,000 tons of meat was sent to China. And it was going to be sent to China anyway because China owns Smithfield. So it's not like they were going to undo, although, the image that Trump was trying to portray, that he's tough on China, et cetera, that he would step in somehow and force these companies which wanted to send their product to their ownership country because they wanted to eat the stuff, you have to break that contract. You're going to have to just, to hell with it. The United States, national security, everybody put your pork down. It's staying here in the United States because shortage, except there wasn't really much of a shortage as it turns out. So that's pretty interesting all by itself. The data compiled by Panjiva, Panjiva, the supply chain research unit of S&P Global Market Intelligence and the Department of Agriculture, is potentially embarrassing for an industry that trumpeted its role in feeding the American public to argue to keep plants operating during the pandemic. But it's equally embarrassing for the government, don't you think? Although some meat companies say much of their exported pork was produced before the outbreak, even previously processed meat could have stocked shelves in April and May. After slaughterhouses in several states were closed when thousands of workers tested positive and dozens died, the industry publicly lobbied the Trump administration to intervene with state and local officials or risk major meat shortages across American grocery stores. Indeed, some retailers put limits on the amount of meat customers could buy. I did see that. And the fast food chain Wendy's, at one point, ran low on hamburger. My God. But the meat packers, including Smithfield, which China's largest pork producer, bought in 2013, did not emphasize, at least not publicly, that keeping the plants open would also protect their long-term investments in exporting to a country that is vital to their growth and that owns them, for that matter. Analysts say the meat shortages have subsided, with most plants having reopened, though many are still operating at slower speeds, which is probably better anyway. As some meat companies continue to test their workers, they are discovering positive cases, which means some meat companies aren't testing anybody. So far, 25,523 meatpacking workers have tested positive and 89 have died, according to the Food and Environment Reporting Network, which has been tracking the outbreak. After decades of relatively stagnant pork consumption in the United States and a recent thaw in the trade war with China, this was the year that pork exports were set to take off. And so the pandemic was very inconvenient. What a story. Okay, I think we can probably stop it here, though there's plenty more if you want to dive further into it. But it is pretty amazing and abusive and counter to the narrative that Trump prefers about his being so super tough on China. But as we know, he's really just a servant boy who gives them beautiful chocolate cake when they show up at Mar-a-Lago and would never stand in the way of 129,000 tons of our precious American meat during a supposed shortage being shipped off to China. Besides, that's just the contract. Nothing we can do about that. In other COVID-19 news, fast breaking, it is pointed out here that as the Republican Party moves towards relocating its national convention, they hope, to Florida, since North Carolina wasn't having any of it. Here's an update on how things are going in Florida. 260 workers test positive for COVID-19 at Orlando International Airport. I don't know if that's necessarily the airport you'd be flying through on your way to the convention. Didn't they say it was in Jacksonville? So probably not. 2,993 people have died from COVID-19 in Florida at this point. But of more concern is that one of the biggest airport in Florida, through which a lot of its traffic is likely to move, both for the convention and for everything else, and for the reopened Disney, certainly. It's a little troublesome that 260 workers at Orlando International Airport have tested positive after nearly 500 employees were actually tested. So 500 employees tested, nearly 500, less than 500. 260 positives, that's a terrible positivity rate for Orlando International Airport. Welcome to Florida. Everything's totally under control here. Bring us your business. That's pretty amazing. Okay, so bad news for the Floridians there. Let's see. Do you want some more bad news? I'm sure I have some. Let's look around and see what I've got to share with you. We'll scroll further back. I do feel like there's some surprises waiting for us way down low in pocket here. And I should leave notes for myself about what those things actually are. Here we go. Here's something that Greg reminded me of as were we on the air when we said it? We were worried about people drinking bleach, and don't take this brand new medication unsupervised, but with people drinking bleach, I suppose anything's possible. Oh, yes, right. The one that reminds me of the now resolved case we spoke about yesterday about the supposedly poisoned milkshakes. Apparently they had some sort of vaguely bleach smell to them. And as I said, I think the crack detectives there in New York figured out apparently they had washed the machine, but they hadn't rinsed the machine thoroughly enough before putting it back into service to make the shakes, and the cleaning product got into the shakes and something, and it got portrayed as an assassination attempt. But that's okay, because drinking bleach is in fashion these days. That has not gone away, as it turns out, believe it or not. And I had these fascinating survey results to share with you, though the article is relatively old for our operations. June 5th, so like ancient times. But believe it or not, CNN has this to report. A third of Americans surveyed engaged in risky cleaning behaviors during the COVID-19 pandemic. Some, not a third of them, but some have even gargled with bleach, which quite honestly I could probably do with right now the way I got this frog in my throat. But probably better products to use than bleach. Wow. So, but interesting. Now, the broader umbrella term of risky cleaning behaviors, I guess, could capture a lot more people. In fact, a third. Would you like to know what Americans are doing, or would you rather put it out of your head? Americans are putting their health at risk. Did you know that? While trying to protect it, so they say. About a third of Americans surveyed by the U.S. It's the CDC. And I guess they do their own survey work, or at least hire someone to do it for them. They say a third of Americans surveyed by the CDC here have used some kind of risky cleaning practice to stop the spread of COVID-19. People have put bleach in their food and milkshakes, even. Others have gargled or inhaled it. And some have washed their bodies with household cleaning and disinfectant products. Doesn't sound like a good idea, but I do know that, probably early on when it was immediately apparent that hand sanitizers would not be available, some people got the idea that they could sanitize their hands with Clorox cleaning wipes, not the bleach, but the cleaning wipes that you might use on a tabletop or a counter. And it's not good for you. None of this cleaning behavior is recommended by the CDC, but this gap in understanding how to safely clean and handle cleaning products during the COVID-19 pandemic may explain why there's been a sharp increase in the number of calls to poison centers during the pandemic. Yes, people said they were cleaning more frequently because of the pandemic, and that's a good thing, but only about half said that they really knew how to clean and disinfect their homes safely. This would be a good opportunity for clear communication from health authorities to the American public, but you can't have that because it makes the president look bad, dumb, and unhealthy. So you're all going to have to hurt yourselves instead. Of those people who were surveyed that acknowledged that they used high-risk cleaning practices to prevent the spread of COVID-19, more were likely to report health problems related to cleaning. The biggest problem area was people's limited understanding of how to prepare cleaning solutions. Only 23% knew, for instance, to use only room temperature water to dilute bleach solutions. Okay. I don't think I knew that offhand, although I'm a directions reader, so I probably would have seen that at some point. Not the case for everybody, obviously. People were better about using gloves and other protective equipment. About 71% said they knew gloves were recommended for use with some cleaning materials, and 68% said they knew they should wash their hands after using cleaning products. Some people were, of course, unfortunately, washing their hands with those cleaning products, and that's not good. Most people also said they knew that they should keep cleaners out of the reach of children, but only 54% knew that hand sanitizer should also be kept in a place where children can't get to it, even though I assume that some people were encouraging the use of hand sanitizer by the kids. Well, they shouldn't be allowed access to the bulk of it, the rest of it, while they're not sanitizing their hands with it, because you never know what they're going to do with it. The CDC recommends that people always read the instructions, I told you, on cleaning products, although sometimes they seem crazy, don't they? a little overcautious. When cleaning, wear gloves or other protective gear. Don't mix cleaning chemicals. The CDC also said it will be important to continue education campaigns, or even start them, to help people better understand how to safely clean while they're at home. I got most of the cleaning advice I needed, or I think anyway, from elsewhere. The CDC, not particularly active in communicating that to people, and that has, I think, to do with the fact that the administration stomped on all their work early on. But okay, yes, and I guess a good point. You should be wearing gloves when you use cleaning products. It doesn't say on the label for cleaning wipes that you should be using gloves, so maybe that's not so bad. But you're not supposed to wash your hands with them. And that was going on out there and led to a lot of problems. I don't think any of them life-threatening, but not good for your skin. All right, just thought I would put that one out there. Yeah, you know what? The other thing I ought to have done is update everybody on the, if you haven't read much about it, the insanity of the Boogaloo movement. I know we've mentioned it on the air once or twice, but it's escalating now, and we could have filled you in on background on this stuff a long time ago. We mentioned it, and we did a little bit, but now I think we're going to need to turn more attention to it now that the reports are out that some security officers who were shot in Oakland at a time coinciding with some of the early protests in this latest round of Black Lives Matter protests in Oakland were shot, and the right wing made use of that event to imply that it was, in fact, the protesters who had shot these officers because of their anger at police officers. And as it turns out, well, for one thing, the security camera footage shows that there were no demonstrations going on in the area where these officers were shot. And two, they now have their man. And guess what? He's one of those right-wing lunatics, after all, and a Boogaloo enthusiast who may or may not align entirely politically with the more mainstream in terms of their numbers being larger, but still absolutely crazy and out of control right-wingers who spent their time accusing demonstrators, protesters, and, of course, the legendary Antifa of having committed this murder. Oh, I believe 2 officers were shot there. 1 died and 1 survived. But apparently this same person then moved on and shot cops elsewhere. And, well, they're unraveling that plot now and are charging him with these shootings and with having hatched a plot to shoot cops in proximity to the demonstrations in the hopes that the demonstrators would themselves be blamed for it. How interesting. But there are a lot of stories swirling around it, and I'll have to find you a couple of the stories. And I just didn't park any of the stories about this. They're finding out about the shooter having been a Boogaloo adherent, but I'll have to find some of those for you. And so I'm sure that there are probably some over at Daily Kos on the blog side to share with you. But maybe what I can do with the closing minutes here is read you a tangential story that will raise some other awareness. I mean, many people have noted that some of the same gun-toting right-wing lunatics and Boogaloo adherents are also showing up at the protests as counter-demonstrators and carrying their weapons, and also are showing up not only at as counter-protesters to where the Black Lives Matter protesters are congregating, but also planting themselves in proximity to statues that they fear might be targeted for removal by protesters. and assigning themselves the task of protecting our heritage and history with their weapons, and that police seem content to have them there, uninterested in dispersing that crowd. And on the one hand, gun enthusiasts like to say it is the guns themselves that determine that cops don't seek to move them because they know they can't be moved because they're protecting themselves. But there's a larger story there, more important, more sinister as well, which is, of course, you've already guessed, that there's a tremendous affinity between the right-wing lunatics and the Boogaloo people, by which I mean the cops, the right-wing lunatics, and the Boogaloo people and the militia people. And it's reported on in a number of fronts, and a theme to which our own Dave Newart, if I've pronounced his name correctly, and it's another one I've never actually had to do out loud, who's dedicated his life, essentially, in the past couple of years to this story. But do I have one of the stories handy? No, I don't. And I'll have to make maybe Friday can be dedicated to that. Instead, I have in front of me Danielle Shulkin's piece at Just Security, which covers the topic. And maybe we do ourselves a service by reading a little bit outside of the Daily Coast Circle once in a while on these things. White supremacist infiltration of U.S. police forces. Fact-checking National Security Advisor O'Brien, who I guess thinks it's just a few bad apples. That whole excuse again. On Sunday morning, this was back in early June, late May. Sunday morning, CNN's Jake Tapper asked President Trump's National Security Advisor, Robert O'Brien, himself a little bit questionable in his background, whether he thinks systemic racism is a problem in law enforcement agencies in the United States. He responded, I don't think there is systemic racism. Is this the one? Isn't he the guy that went to college in apartheid South Africa? Did he grow up there? I don't know what his story is now. Offhand, I remember some reference to that. Anyway, he goes on to saying, I think 99.9% of our law enforcement officers are great Americans, but there's a few bad apples. Yeah, well, questionable judgment all by itself. But there are two flaws in O'Brien's response. First, O'Brien ignores the well-documented support by law enforcement officers of alt-right extremist ideology throughout the country. Second, O'Brien misunderstands the nature of systemic racism, a term that means that institutions we have in place produce racially disparate effects on minority populations in his discussions of individual officers. An FBI intelligence assessment titled White Supremacist Infiltration of Law Enforcement and published in 2006 during the administration of George W. Bush raised alarm over white supremacist groups' interests in infiltrating law enforcement communities or recruiting law enforcement personnel. The report, based on FBI investigations and open sources, warned, for example, that skinhead groups were actively encouraging their members to become ghost skins, as they were calling them, within law enforcement agencies, a term, the report said, white supremacists use to describe members who avoid overt displays of their beliefs to blend into society and covertly advance white supremacist causes. In 2015, a classified FBI counterterrorism policy guide obtained by The Intercept stated that domestic terrorism investigations focused on militia extremists, white supremacist extremists, and sovereign citizen extremists often have identified active links to law enforcement officers. In 2009, the Department of Homeland Security issued a report on right-wing extremism and its relationship to violent radicalization in the United States. The report's principal researcher on the subject, Darrell Johnson, later told The Intercept, federal law enforcement agencies in general, the FBI, the Marshals, the ATF, are aware that extremists have infiltrated state and local law enforcement agencies and that there are people in law enforcement agencies that may be sympathetic to these groups. This may not be a coincidence. An investigation published in 2019 by the Center for Investigative Reporting found that hundreds of active duty and retired law enforcement officers are members of Confederate sympathizing anti-Islam or anti-government militia groups on Facebook. Within these private groups, members are often openly racist, Police officers have also been linked to groups like the Oath Keepers and the Three Percenters, who believe in defending white Americans from, quote, enslavement, and are actively hostile to immigrants. The investigation identified active duty and retired police officers as active members in explicitly racist Facebook groups such as Veterans Against Islamic Filth, the group deliberately lowercases Islamic in its name, and Purge Worldwide, the cure for the Islamic disease in your country. That's pretty overt, right? The leader of the Oath Keepers movement, Stuart Rhodes, bragged in 2009 that his anti-government group includes thousands of retired and active law enforcement officers. On May 30th, during protests in New York City, a New York Police Department officer appears to have made a hand gesture, you know the one, that has been linked to white supremacist groups, which the New York Attorney General asked to be reported to her office. The Plainview Project, a database of public Facebook comments made by nearly 2,900 current and former police officers in 8 cities, suggested that nearly 1 in 5 of the current officers identified in the study made public posts or comments that appear to endorse violence, racism, and bigotry, as reported by BuzzFeed News and Injustice Watch in a study of the database. For example, there are 1,269 identified problematic posts from active duty Philadelphia police officers on the site. Of the 1,073 Philadelphia police officers identified by the Plainview Project, 327 of them posted public content endorsing violence, racism, and bigotry. Of those 327, at least 64 hold leadership roles within the force, serving as corporals, sergeants, lieutenants, captains, or inspectors. The history of racism and white supremacist membership in law enforcement agencies is long and well documented. In the 1990s, and we might as well start here in the 1860s, but in the 1990s, a federal judge found that there was a neo-Nazi white supremacist gang of Los Angeles police deputies, self-styled the Vikings, that existed with the knowledge of police department officials. In 2015 and 16, the San Francisco Police Department attempted to fire at least 17 officers after investigations revealed they were sending racist text messages. The Ku Klux Klan, historically and even in recent years, has had ties to local law enforcement. In 2014, a police department in Central Florida fired 2 officers, one of whom was the deputy police chief, for being members of the Ku Klux Klan. Commendably, the information in that case came from the FBI via the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. In 2015, a North Carolina police officer was pictured giving a Nazi salute at a KKK rally. The failure of police units to discipline police officers over allegations of excessive use of force and or for racist behavior or actions is part and parcel of the systemic issues protesters have demonstrated over for many years and in recent days. The officer charged with George Floyd's murder, Derek Chauvin, was the subject of at least 17 misconduct complaints prior to Floyd's death, almost all of which resulted in no discipline, and the rest of which concluded with only a letter placed in his file. News reports say the nature of the complaints is unclear from the information the Minneapolis Police Department released, and that the department wouldn't provide details. In 2018, BuzzFeed News reported that at least 319 NYPD employees committed offenses, including harassment and assault in some cases, that were sufficient cause for termination between 2011 and 2015, but for which they were not fired. 38 were found guilty by a police tribunal of excessive force, getting into a fight, or firing their gun unnecessarily, according to the news outlet. Some officers who declined to be identified told BuzzFeed the internal investigations into the actions were rife with favoritism, racism, and pressures to just plead guilty. So they feel like they might have been the victims in all of this. Disciplinary systems that struggle to hold officers to account for other offenses will similarly fail to remove racist police officers, undermining public trust in entire departments. In Chicago, according to the Citizens Police Data Project, only 7% of all police complaints have resulted in any disciplinary action, including allegations of police officers using racial slurs. In 2018, the chief of police in Elkhart, Indiana, not only did not discipline an officer, but promoted him to sergeant, despite the officer using police communications equipment to refer to white power, reports ProPublica. Well, there's much more, of course, and there's much more background, and of course, many of you with the historical knowledge will recall the linking of the origins of police departments in America to Southern slave patrols. So no surprise necessarily that there's any kind of crossover, but this documenting the extent to which it's still a problem, even in this modern day and age where we're getting rid of Aunt Jemima names and logos on our pancake mix. We still have work to do in our police departments. But, well, okay. We can get around to the Aunt Jemima problem later on and remind ourselves of it daily. It's a morning program. It's breakfast related. The whole program was about breakfast and breakfast foods today, amazingly enough. Next up, of course, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, which I guess would have been a better place for all of this food-related items, but we'll see whether he's going to continue.
From Daily Co's Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Well, it looks like we get to move off of the breakfast topic. Oregon's largest COVID outbreak is tied to a northeastern Oregon church that grossly violated social distancing rules. The Arkansas Attorney General sued failed televangelist Jim Baker for his fake COVID cure, and California's Pacific Gas and Electric pleaded guilty to, you won't believe it, manslaughter.